Alex always dreamed of success. Like so many people, he imagined a life where he was financially free, where he could travel, support his family, and wake up without worrying about bills or debt. But while the dream was vivid, the reality felt impossibly far away. Every time he tried to start improving his life, something held him back. He would buy books on personal finance, entrepreneurship, or investing. But the books collected dust on his shelf. He would sign up for online courses and webinars, but after a few lessons, he would quit. His ambitions always seemed to crash against the same wall. The mountain felt too high, and the first step too small to matter. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Alex watched as friends and colleagues seemed to move forward. New jobs, new businesses, growing savings. He told himself he just needed the right time to start. Maybe next month, when work was less stressful. Maybe after the holidays. Maybe after he paid off one more credit card. But deep down, Alex knew the truth. He wasn't moving because he felt overwhelmed. It wasn't that he didn't care. In fact, he cared so much that it hurt. Every time he thought about his goals, he felt a knot of frustration. He wanted to change. He wanted to act. But every attempt at change felt like trying to push a boulder up a hill. The task seemed too big, so he stayed where he was, stuck in a cycle of hoping, doubting, and doing nothing. One evening, after another day of feeling disappointed in himself, Alex sat alone in his small apartment. Bills were piled on the corner of his desk. A half-read book on investing lay open, but untouched. His phone buzzed with notifications, sales ads, social media updates, none of it meaningful. He felt the weight of time slipping by. How many more months, he wondered, would he let pass without progress? In that quiet moment, he asked himself a simple but powerful question. What if I'm making this too hard? Maybe the problem wasn't a lack of ambition. Maybe the problem was expecting too much too soon, demanding grand changes instead of small beginnings. What if, he thought, I stopped trying to fix everything at once? What if I just focused on doing something, anything, small enough that I couldn't fail? That night, Alex made a decision. He would stop trying to change his entire life overnight. Instead, he would start with a commitment so small, so easy, that it felt almost silly. 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes of learning about money, success, or personal growth. Just 5 minutes. That was it. No rules about how much he had to achieve. No pressure to finish books or master concepts. Only the promise to show up for 5 tiny minutes. He chose a book on his shelf that had been gathering dust. A book on personal finance. He opened it to the first chapter and read a single page. It took him less than 5 minutes. And when he closed the book, something inside him felt different. For the first time in a long time, Alex felt like he'd kept a promise to himself. It was a small win, but it was a win, and it felt good. That night, as he got ready for bed, Alex thought about how easy it had been. There had been no struggle, no battle with procrastination, just a simple action, too small to resist. And he wondered, could 5 minutes a day really make a difference? Could small steps like this, done over time, build into something meaningful? He didn't have the answer yet, but he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Not the kind of hope that comes from dreaming big dreams and making big plans. The kind of hope that comes from actually doing something, no matter how small. A quiet confidence that maybe, just maybe, change was possible after all. That first night marked the end of his struggle with inaction. The mountain was still there. The climb would still be long. But for the first time, Alex had taken a step. And in that step, he discovered a truth that would shape the rest of his journey. Small, consistent actions are stronger than the grandest intentions left undone. The next morning, Alex woke up with a strange sense of calm. There was no pressure, no overwhelming to-do list in his mind. Just one small task, 5 minutes of learning. He grabbed his coffee, sat by the window where the soft light of dawn crept in, and opened his book again. Another page, another small victory. The simplicity of it felt almost like a secret, as if he'd stumbled on a hidden path that others had overlooked in their rush for quick success. For the first time in a long while, Alex felt control over his progress. The rule was simple. No matter how busy, no matter how tired, he would dedicate at least 5 minutes a day to learning something that could build his future. He didn't worry about how much he absorbed or how fast he progressed. The victory was in showing up. The act itself was success. Within the first week, something unexpected happened. 5 minutes often turned into 10. 10 became 15. Not because he forced it, but because once he started, the hardest part was over. Getting started had always been the battle. Now the battle was gone. He found himself reading not just one page, but several. And yet, even on the days when he truly only had 5 minutes, when work drained him or life got in the way, he still won. Because he kept his promise. The rule became a quiet anchor in his chaotic days. No matter what else happened, a bad day at work, an argument with a friend, a sleepless night, he could still claim a small win. 5 minutes of progress. And those small wins began to stack up. He didn't feel like a failure anymore. He felt like someone who took action, even in the smallest ways. Soon, Alex started to notice the ripple effect of this tiny habit. The 5-minute rule gave him confidence, not just in learning, but in other parts of his life. If he could show up for 5 minutes a day to learn, what else could he do? He began applying the same principle to his health. 5 minutes of stretching in the morning, 5 minutes of cleaning in the evening. And just like that, areas of his life that had felt out of control began to shift. What made the 5-minute rule so powerful wasn't just its simplicity. It was the fact that it removed the weight of perfection. Alex no longer felt the need to master everything in one sitting. He didn't beat himself up for not reading a full chapter or completing an entire course module. He stopped comparing his progress to others who seemed further ahead. His focus was narrow and personal. Did I show up today? Did I honor my 5 minutes? If the answer was yes, then he was moving forward. The rule also taught him something profound about discipline. People often think of discipline as force, as pushing through resistance with sheer willpower. But Alex discovered that real discipline is gentle. It's about creating conditions where doing the right thing feels natural, not forced. The 5-minute rule made discipline easy because it made starting easy. And once he started, the rest often took care of itself. After a month, Alex began to see the changes not just in his daily routine, but in his mindset. Financial terms that had once intimidated him, like compound interest, diversification, or index funds, no longer felt like a foreign language. He started to connect ideas. Concepts that had once seemed complex now felt approachable, even exciting. His notebook, once empty, filled with small insights and questions to explore. And the best part? The rule adapted to his life. Some days, his 5 minutes happened in the morning with his coffee. Other days, it was during his lunch break or right before bed. The flexibility meant no excuses. Wherever he was, whatever his day looked like, he could find 5 minutes. Alex didn't announce his habit to the world. There were no grand declarations on social media, no boasts to friends. This was his quiet commitment to himself. a private promise that, day by day, was reshaping his future. And as he closed his book one evening, after another satisfying 5 minutes, he realized something. The 5-minute rule wasn't just about learning. It was about becoming. Becoming the kind of person who shows up. Becoming the kind of person who takes small steps toward big goals. The birth of the 5-minute rule marked the end of Alex's struggle with inaction. It gave him a tool that was small enough to start, yet powerful enough to change his life. And in those small daily moments, Alex felt something he hadn't felt in years. Momentum. Slow, steady, unstoppable momentum. Weeks turned into months, and the 5-minute rule became as natural to Alex as brushing his teeth. What started as a tiny habit grew roots deep into his daily life. He no longer had to remind himself or push himself to show up. It was simply part of who he was. And slowly, almost invisibly at first, the small actions began to stack up. At first, the changes were quiet, hard to see from the outside. But inside, Alex felt the difference. His confidence grew. The concepts that had once seemed intimidating now felt familiar. He understood how compound interest worked, how small investments could grow over time. He began to see money not just as something to spend or save, but as a tool he could learn to master, one tiny lesson at a time. The 5-minute habit didn't just stay confined to books. It started to spill into other parts of his day. During his commute, Alex listened to short podcasts about personal finance, entrepreneurship, or productivity. When waiting in line, he pulled up articles instead of scrolling aimlessly through social media. In the evenings, he sometimes found himself writing down ideas sparked by his learning. Small business ideas, questions about investing, thoughts about how to budget smarter. He didn't force these extensions of the habit. They happened naturally. The more he learned, the more curious he became. Each small piece of knowledge connected to the next, like stepping stones across a wide river. He no longer felt overwhelmed by the distance. He focused on the next stone, the next small step. One day, after about 6 months of tiny daily actions, Alex did something he once thought was beyond him. He opened his first investment account. He didn't have much to start with. Just a small amount he could afford, less than what he might spend on a night out. But the amount didn't matter. What mattered was the action. He had taken a step from theory to practice, and that step felt huge. That small investment was the first of many. Over time, Alex made tiny deposits whenever he could. A little from his paycheck here, a small bonus there. And just like his habit of learning, his habit of investing grew. He tracked his progress in a simple notebook, noting down what he invested, what he learned, and how he felt along the way. The numbers started small. But as he had come to understand deeply, small numbers can grow big over time, just like small actions. Alex noticed other changes too. He spent less on things that didn't matter. The more he learned about money, the less he felt the need to chase status or impress others with purchases. His focus shifted inward. How can I build a life of freedom, not just a life of appearances? That simple question guided him in ways he hadn't expected. The compound effect wasn't just about money. It was about identity. Each small action was a vote for the person he wanted to become. Every 5-minute reading session, every tiny investment, every moment spent learning instead of wasting time. They all reinforced a new truth. Alex was someone who built his future, brick by tiny brick. Over time, those small bricks formed a solid foundation. Alex no longer worried about making giant leaps. He didn't chase risky shortcuts or overnight success. Instead, he trusted the process. the slow, steady growth that comes from consistent effort. And as his knowledge grew, so did his ability to spot opportunities. A friend mentioned a side business idea. Alex saw the potential and partnered up. A colleague talked about a savings plan. Alex shared what he'd learned and improved his own strategy in the process. The compound effect also changed the way Alex felt about time. He no longer saw a day as wasted if he didn't achieve something huge. A day was a win if he honored his small habits. A single step forward, no matter how small, was still progress. That mindset freed him from the guilt and frustration that had once kept him stuck. Looking back, Alex realized something powerful. None of the changes felt dramatic in the moment. Each day's action seemed small, almost insignificant. But over time, those small actions built momentum. And momentum, once it builds, is hard to stop. That's the real magic of the compound effect. It turns small, quiet wins into unstoppable growth. The compound effect of tiny actions didn't just change Alex's bank account. It changed Alex himself. And in that change, he discovered the true power of habits. Not in what they achieve in a day, but in what they build across a lifetime. As Alex's small habits continued, their influence began to spread beyond his financial knowledge and investments. What started as 5 minutes of reading became the spark that transformed his entire approach to life. The ripple effect of those tiny actions touched areas he hadn't even intended to change. And that, perhaps, was the greatest surprise of all. One of the first ripples appeared in how Alex managed his daily spending. Before, money had seemed to disappear without him realizing where it went. But now, inspired by his learning, he dedicated 5 minutes each evening to review the day's expenses. Just a quick glance at his account, a few notes in his notebook, nothing complicated. But those 5 minutes of awareness changed everything. He saw patterns he hadn't noticed, small, unnecessary purchases that added up, subscriptions he no longer used, little habits that drained his wallet. And as he spotted them, he began to adjust. He didn't impose harsh restrictions or try to change overnight. Instead, he made one small change at a time. He canceled a subscription here, chose to cook at home instead of eating out there. The changes were so small, they barely felt like sacrifices. But over time, the savings added up, just as his knowledge had. The ripple effect didn't stop with money. The discipline Alex built through his 5-minute rule began to shape his time. He realized that if 5 minutes of focused action could change his finances, the same approach might work in other parts of his life. So he began to experiment. 5 minutes of tidying his space each evening. 5 minutes of stretching in the morning. 5 minutes of writing down ideas for his side hustle. Small actions, easy to begin, and yet powerful in their impact. Slowly, Alex's days took on a new rhythm. He no longer felt overwhelmed by long to-do lists. Instead, he focused on small wins. And with each small win, he built confidence. Confidence that he could change. Confidence that progress didn't have to be dramatic to be meaningful. The ripple effect also touched his relationships. As Alex became more intentional with his time and choices, he found himself more present with the people he cared about. He listened more closely. He asked better questions. He shared what he was learning, not to impress, but to offer value. And in doing so, he deepened connections that had once felt surface level. His small money habits even inspired conversations with friends and family. People noticed the changes in him, not just in his finances, but in his calm, his focus, his sense of direction. They began asking questions, curious about what he was doing differently. And Alex shared his simple truth. I just started small, and I kept going. One of the most profound ripples was in how Alex saw failure. Before, he'd seen failure as a sign that he wasn't good enough, that maybe success wasn't for him. But the 5-minute rule taught him that failure was just a part of the process, a small step on a long journey. When he tried something new and it didn't work, he didn't give up. He adjusted, he learned, he kept moving, and that resilience became one of his greatest strengths. Over time, the ripples grew wider. His side hustle, born from simple ideas jotted down during 5-minute brainstorming sessions, began to take shape. What started as a small project evolved into a steady stream of additional income. He reinvested those earnings, applying the lessons he'd learned through his tiny financial habits. And little by little, his financial foundation grew stronger. Alex no longer chased perfection or instant results. He trusted the power of consistency. His life wasn't defined by big wins or dramatic transformations. It was shaped by small, intentional choices made day after day. And those choices, those ripples, created a life of purpose, progress, and quiet success. The beauty of the ripple effect was that Alex didn't have to force it. He didn't need grand plans or complex strategies. All he needed was to keep showing up, keep honoring his small habits, and let the ripples spread where they would. And as they spread, they touched every part of his life, turning small daily actions into a legacy of growth. Years passed, and Alex's life looked very different from the one he had known when he first began his 5-minute habit. What started as a small, almost invisible change had blossomed into a complete transformation. But it hadn't happened overnight. There was no dramatic turning point, no single moment when everything changed. Instead, it was the quiet, steady force of small actions, repeated day after day, that reshaped his future. Alex had built a thriving business, one that grew out of ideas he once scribbled during his 5-minute brainstorming sessions. His investments, once small and tentative, had grown steadily, thanks to his consistent contributions and increasing knowledge. He had achieved the kind of financial security he used to only dream about. Not because he'd gotten lucky, but because he'd stayed true to the simple, powerful habit that started it all. And yet, if you asked Alex what he was most proud of, it wasn't the money, the business, or even the freedom he now enjoyed. It was who he had become. The kind of person who showed up day after day for his future. The kind of person who understood that greatness isn't built in sudden leaps, but in small, quiet steps that add up over time. Along the way, Alex learned some powerful lessons. The first was this: consistency beats intensity. Big efforts that fizzle out can't match the power of small efforts that last. The world often praises dramatic transformations, the overnight success, the big win, the massive breakthrough. But real, lasting success is built on what you do when no one is watching, on the tiny decisions you make when there's no applause, no immediate reward. Alex's 5-minute habit taught him that the secret to transformation isn't in doing everything at once. It's in doing something, anything, every day. The second lesson was about identity. Small actions aren't just about achieving goals. They're about becoming. Every 5-minute session was a vote for the kind of person Alex wanted to be. And over time, those votes added up. He didn't have to convince himself that he was disciplined, focused, or capable. His actions proved it. Tiny actions, repeated consistently, shaped not just his results, but his sense of self. The third lesson was about time. Alex realized that time will pass, whether we use it or not. The question isn't how fast we can change, but what we choose to do with the time we have. 5 minutes a day might not seem like much, but over weeks, months, and years, those minutes become hours. Those hours become knowledge. That knowledge becomes action. And that action becomes a new life. Looking back, Alex could see how the ripples of his small habit had spread far beyond what he imagined. His relationships were stronger. His health was better. His mind was clearer. And it all began with the simple decision to stop waiting for the perfect time, the perfect plan, or the perfect opportunity. The perfect time had been 5 minutes ago, and the perfect plan was to begin, no matter how small. Today, Alex shares his story not to boast, but to remind others of what's possible. He tells them, you don't need grand gestures to change your life. You don't need to wait for motivation or inspiration. You just need to start. Start small. Start now. And trust that small, consistent steps will take you further than you ever imagined. As this story comes to a close, remember this. The journey to success isn't a race. It's not about how fast you go. It's about showing up every day in small ways that build a future you'll be proud of. Your 5 minutes today might seem small, but they are the first steps towards something great. The first steps toward the person you're meant to become. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope it inspires you to take that small step today and every day after. Because your future self is waiting, and it starts with what you do right now.